The golden chopsticks remained untouched beside the porcelain bowl, as they had for countless meals before. Prince Chen Wei sat motionless at the lacquered dining table, his dark eyes fixed on the steam rising from the untasted rice. Around him, palace servants exchanged worried glances, their silk slippers shuffling nervously against the polished wooden floors. Emperor Kangxi observed his son from across the ornate dining hall, his weathered face creased with mounting concern. The boy had grown alarmingly thin over the past months, his once robust frame now appearing frail beneath his midnight blue robes. Yet Chen Wei's refusal to explain his behavior remained as steadfast as the mountain peaks visible through the paper windows. "My son," the emperor's voice carried the weight of authority that had commanded millions, yet it softened when addressing his heir. "The kitchen has prepared your favorite dishes. Surely you must eat something." Chen Wei's pale fingers traced the rim of his bowl, but he made no move to lift it. His voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "Forgive me, father. I am simply not hungry." The lie tasted bitter on his tongue, more bitter than the hunger that gnawed at his insides like a living thing. But how could he explain the truth? How could he tell his father that food had become poison to him, that every morsel threatened to unleash something terrible within his soul? The very thought of rice or meat made his stomach recoil in revulsion, while another kind of hunger, one that demanded something far more precious, grew stronger with each passing day. Palace physician Master Liu stepped forward from the shadows where he had been observing, his ancient eyes clouded with cataracts, yet seeming to see more than they should. "Your Highness, your body requires sustenance. This behavior concerns us all." Chen Wei finally raised his gaze, and for a moment something flickered in his dark eyes, something that made Master Liu take an involuntary step backward. It was gone so quickly that the old physician wondered if he had imagined it, but the chill that ran down his spine lingered long after the prince looked away. "I appreciate your concern," Chen Wei said, rising gracefully from his seat. His movements were fluid, almost unnaturally so, like water flowing around stone. "But I assure you, I am quite well." As he glided toward the door, his footsteps made no sound on the wooden floor. Emperor Kangxi watched his son's departure with growing unease, noting how the shadows seemed to bend and follow the prince's movements. Something was terribly wrong, but Chen Wei had built walls around himself that no amount of imperial authority could breach. Outside the dining hall, Chen Wei pressed his back against the cool stone of the corridor wall, his hands trembling with the effort of maintaining his composure. The hunger was growing stronger with each passing day, and soon, he feared, even his iron will would not be enough to contain what dwelt within him. The curse that had been placed upon him demanded sustenance of a different kind, one that would horrify his father and destroy everything the dynasty had built. Master Liu's weathered hands trembled as he examined the ancient text by candlelight. The medical treatise, written in archaic characters that few could still decipher, spoke of conditions that existed beyond the realm of conventional medicine. His years of service to the imperial family had taught him that some ailments could not be cured with herbs and acupuncture alone. The symptoms he had observed in Prince Chen Wei matched those described in the forbidden section of the text: the aversion to food, the unnatural grace of movement, the way shadows seemed drawn to his presence. Most disturbing of all were the reports from palace guards of strange sounds emanating from the prince's chambers during the darkest hours of night. A soft knock interrupted his studies. "Enter!" he called, quickly closing the dangerous text. Young servant Mei Lin stepped into his quarters, her face pale with fear. She served in the prince's wing of the palace and had requested this private audience. Her hands twisted the fabric of her plain cotton dress as she struggled to find words. "Master Liu, I must tell someone, but I fear for my life if the wrong ears hear my words." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Speak freely, child. These walls have heard many secrets, and they keep them well." Mei Lin glanced around nervously before continuing. "It's about Prince Chen Wei. 3 nights ago, I was returning late from the kitchens when I heard sounds from his chambers. Not human sounds, Master Liu. Like an animal in pain, or—" She paused, shuddering. "Like something hungry." The physician felt his blood turn cold. "What else have you observed?" "He dismisses all servants before sunset now, and his chambers remain sealed until dawn. But sometimes, when the moon is brightest, I've seen him on his balcony." Her voice dropped even lower. "He stands there for hours, perfectly still, as if he's listening to something only he can hear." Master Liu nodded gravely. The pieces of the puzzle were forming a picture he had hoped never to see. "Has anyone else noticed these peculiarities?" The night guards whisper among themselves, but they're too frightened to report anything official. They say his shadow moves independently of his body, and that mirrors seem to show something different than what stands before them. The old physician's mind raced through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. The ancient text spoke of curses that could transform the very essence of a person, turning them into something that existed between the worlds of the living and the dead. Such beings could not sustain themselves on ordinary food. They required something far more precious and terrible. "Mei Lin," he said carefully, "you must promise me something. Under no circumstances should you or any of the other servants approach the prince's chambers after dark. And if you see him during the day, behaving strangely, you must alert me immediately." The girl nodded vigorously, relief evident on her face at having shared her burden. As she departed, Master Liu reopened the forbidden text. The candlelight flickered across warnings written in blood-red ink, describing the progressive stages of a transformation that, once begun, could only be stopped by the most extreme measures. The discovery came with the dawn. Palace Guard Captain Zhao found the body at the base of the Jade Steps, leading to the Hall of Supreme Harmony. Minister Li Weiming lay crumpled like a broken doll, his court robes torn and stained with blood that had turned black in the moonlight. But it was the expression on his face that would haunt Captain Zhao's dreams for years to come. A look of absolute terror, frozen in death, as if he had seen something beyond mortal comprehension. The minister's throat bore strange wounds, not quite like those of any weapon he had ever seen. They appeared almost like bite marks, but far too large and precisely placed to be from any human mouth. "Captain!" One of the younger guards came running, his face pale with shock. "We found footprints in the garden." Zhao followed the guard to where flower petals lay scattered like drops of blood. Among them were impressions in the soft earth, bare human feet that had left marks so deep they suggested impossible strength. Most disturbing of all, the footprints simply ended at the garden's edge, as if their maker had vanished into thin air. Master Liu arrived within the hour, his ancient frame moving more slowly than usual as he approached the corpse. The physician's examination was thorough but brief, his experienced hands confirming what his eyes had already told him. "The wounds are precise," he murmured to Captain Zhao, ensuring their conversation could not be overheard. "They target the major arteries with surgical accuracy, but the shape—" He paused, touching the edge of one mark with a trembling finger. "I have seen similar wounds described in texts that should not exist." "What kind of texts?" Zhao asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Ones that speak of creatures that are no longer fully human. Beings that sustain themselves on the life force of others." Master Liu's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Captain, I fear we are dealing with something that cannot be fought with conventional weapons." Emperor Kangxi received the news with an impassive face, but his knuckles turned white as he gripped the armrests of his throne. "Another death in the palace," another mystery that threatened the stability of his reign. He could see the fear and speculation in his advisor's eyes. "Double the palace guard," he commanded. "No one moves through the corridors alone after dark. And I want a full investigation. Whoever is responsible will face imperial justice." High above, Prince Chen Wei observed the scene from his balcony with a mixture of horror and growing certainty. The wounds on Li's body, the precisely targeted arteries, the inhuman strength required to leave such deep footprints, all of it pointed to a creature of supernatural power. A creature exactly like what he was becoming. But Chen Wei's horror stemmed not just from recognition, but from the complete absence of memory. The last clear recollection he had was of standing in the courtyard, fighting the hunger. Everything after that was a black void, as if his consciousness had simply ceased to exist, while something else controlled his body. Emperor Kangxi stood alone in his private study, staring at reports spread across his desk like fragments of a nightmare. 3 deaths in 2 weeks, each bearing the same impossible wounds, each victim found in areas that should have been secure. Captain Zhao's investigation had yielded more questions than answers. But it was not the official reports that kept the emperor awake. It was his own observations. Chen Wei's continued absence from court functions now coincided perfectly with the timing of the murders. His son's physical deterioration had accelerated, his pale skin taking on an almost translucent quality that made him appear more spirit than flesh. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he called. Master Liu stepped into the study, carrying a leather satchel that seemed to weigh more than his frail body should bear. "Your Imperial Majesty, I have completed my examination of all 3 victims, and I have reached conclusions that I pray are wrong." "Speak freely, old friend." "Makai." Master Liu opened his satchel and withdrew ancient texts bound in materials the Emperor did not want to identify. "The wounds are not random, Your Majesty. They show knowledge of human anatomy that surpasses even my understanding. More than that, they suggest a purpose beyond mere killing. They are positioned to allow for maximum extraction of life force." The Emperor felt his blood turn to ice. Life force? The ancient texts speak of beings that exist between the world of the living and the dead. They cannot sustain themselves on ordinary food, as their transformed bodies require more essential nourishment. The physician's hands trembled as he opened one of the forbidden texts. They feed on what the ancients called Kuai, the vital energy that animates all living things. Emperor Kangxi stared at the archaic characters, many illegible to him, but some clear enough to understand their horrifying implications. "What you are describing sounds like a Jiangshi, Your Majesty. What the common people call a hopping vampire, though the reality is far more complex than folklore suggests. These beings retain their intelligence and many human memories, but their fundamental nature has been altered by dark magic or ancient curses." The room fell silent except for the soft whisper of silk as the Emperor's robes rustled with his barely controlled trembling. Everything he had observed about his son's condition suddenly took on new and terrible significance. "How does such a transformation occur?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "The text suggests several possibilities: exposure to cursed artifacts, contact with malevolent spirits during vulnerable moments, or it can be hereditary, passed down through bloodlines touched by supernatural forces in previous generations. If such a creature were residing in the palace, what could be done to stop it?" Master Liu's expression grew even more grave. "The texts speak of various methods, but they all require extreme measures. Holy relics, blessed weapons, rituals that demand great sacrifice, and even then, success is not guaranteed. And if the creature in question were someone beloved?" The old physician met his emperor's eyes directly. "Your Majesty, the texts are clear. Once the transformation reaches a certain stage, the original person is lost. What remains may look familiar, may even retain some memories, but its fundamental nature has changed. It is no longer human, and it will never again be capable of human love or compassion. How long do we have before the transformation becomes irreversible? Based on the pattern of attacks and what the texts describe, I would estimate perhaps a week, maybe less. The creature grows stronger with each feeding, and its human consciousness grows weaker. The servants' quarters buzzed with whispered conversations and fearful glances as news of Cook Jiang's murder spread through the palace like wildfire. The same mysterious wounds, the same impossible circumstances that had marked the previous victims. But this time, there had been witnesses, people who had heard the sounds of struggle before they ended with terrifying abruptness. Mei Lin sat on her narrow bed, hands clasped tightly as she tried to make sense of the fragments of memory that haunted her. 3 nights ago, she had fled from Prince Chen Wei in the courtyard, sensing danger in his unnatural stillness and strange voice. Since then, she had tried to convince herself that her fear had been misplaced, that loyalty demanded she dismiss her suspicions. But the timing of the deaths, their coincidence with the full moon, and most of all, the memory of Chen Wei's final word to her, "Run," painted a picture that no amount of denial could erase. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Mei Lin, may I come in?" Elder servant Huang entered, her lined face grave with concern. The woman had worked in the palace for 40 years and commanded respect from servants and nobles alike. "Child, there are whispers about you throughout the servants' hall. They say you had an encounter with Prince Chen Wei on the night of Minister Li's death." Mei Lin felt her heart skip a beat. "I served him dinner that evening, as always." "That is not what I mean, and you know it." Elder Huang's voice was gentle but firm. "The night guard saw you running from the courtyard, as if demons were chasing you. What did you see out there?" Mei Lin sank back onto her bed, the weight of her secret becoming too heavy to bear alone. Something was wrong with him, Elder Huang. His voice, his manner, the way he moved. It was not the prince we know. "Tell me everything." And so Mei Lin did, describing the unnatural stillness of Chen Wei's posture, the otherworldly resonance in his voice, and the way shadows had seemed to writhe around him, independently of any light source. She spoke of how he had called her name from impossible distances, and how his final warning had probably saved her life. Elder Huang listened in silence, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "You realize what you are suggesting?" "I'm simply telling you what I experienced." "But Elder Huang, what if the prince is in danger? What if something has been done to him, something that is making him behave this way?" The possibility had kept Mei Lin awake for 3 days. The Prince Chen Wei, she knew, was kind to servants, gentle with animals, and devoted to his studies of philosophy and poetry. If he was involved in these murders, it could only be because some external force was controlling him. That is a dangerous thought, child. But it may also be the only one that offers hope. Elder Huang began pacing the small room. If the prince is being influenced by dark magic or some kind of curse, then perhaps something can be done to help him. But who would we tell? Who would believe us? Master Liu might listen. He has always seemed to understand things that others dismiss as superstition. Elder Huang paused. But approaching him would be incredibly dangerous. If we are wrong, we could be accused of treason. If we are right, we could be putting ourselves in the path of something far more dangerous than imperial justice. Mei Lin stood and moved to the window, looking out at the palace grounds where she had once felt safe. Now every shadow seemed to hide potential death. "Prince Chen Wei has always treated us servants with kindness and respect," she said quietly. "If there is even a chance that he is trapped inside whatever he has become, don't we owe him the same loyalty he showed us?" Elder Huang smiled sadly. You have a brave heart, child. Very well. Tomorrow, when Master Liu makes his morning rounds, we will find a way to speak with him privately. Master Liu's private chambers had become a repository of forbidden knowledge. Ancient texts lay open on every surface, their yellowed pages covered with warnings, written in languages that predated the current dynasty. When Mei Lin and Elder Huang arrived at dawn, he confirmed their worst fears. Prince Chen Wei is transforming into what the ancients called a jiangshi, a creature that feeds on human life force, he explained, showing them woodblock prints depicting beings that looked human but cast no shadows. The process is gradual but irreversible, and with each feeding, his human consciousness becomes weaker while the monster grows stronger. Elder Huang studied the texts with practiced eyes. These speak of ways to break such curses. Are they possible? Theoretically, yes, but they require specific conditions and enormous risks. Master Liu turned to a page covered with ritual diagrams. The transformation can only be reversed during a moment of supreme emotional crisis for the cursed individual, typically when they are forced to confront what they have become. At that moment, if certain rituals are performed correctly, the curse can be transferred or destroyed. What kind of emotional crisis? Mei Lin asked, though she feared the answer. Usually, the realization that they have harmed someone they truly love. The shock of that knowledge can sometimes break through the curse's hold on their consciousness. Master Liu's voice grew heavy with sorrow. But forcing such a realization often requires exposing the cursed person to the full extent of their crimes. The implications hung in the air like a death sentence. To save Prince Chen Wei, they would first have to show him the people he had killed, the blood on his hands, the horror of what he had become. There is another complication, Master Liu continued. The ritual requires the presence of someone the cursed individual loves unconditionally, someone whose life they would willingly sacrifice their own to protect. Only that person can serve as an anchor to pull them back from the darkness. His father, Elder Huang said immediately, Emperor Kangxi loves the prince above all else, and that love is returned. Yes, but consider what we would be asking of the emperor. He would have to stand face to face with the monster his beloved son has become, knowing that one wrong move could result in his own death. And even if the ritual succeeds, the trauma of the experience might destroy their relationship forever. A long silence fell over the room as each person contemplated the impossible choices before them. They could do nothing and watch as Prince Chen Wei completed his transformation, eventually becoming a creature that would hunt throughout the palace until discovered and destroyed. Or they could attempt the ritual, risking not only their own lives, but also the sanity and safety of the emperor himself. How long do we have? Mei Lin asked. Master Liu consulted one of the texts, his finger tracing lines of ancient characters. Based on the pattern of murders and the descriptions of the transformation stages, I estimate 3 days at most. After that, the human consciousness will be completely suppressed, and the ritual will no longer be possible. Then we have no choice, Elder Huang said with finality. We must approach the emperor and convince him to attempt the ritual. The throne room had never felt so vast or so cold. Emperor Kangxi sat rigidly upon the dragon throne, his hands gripping the armrests as he listened to the most impossible conversation of his reign. Before him stood Master Liu, elder servant Huang, and young Mei Lin, 3 people who should never have been granted an audience together. You are asking me to believe that my son is a creature from folklore, the emperor said, his voice carefully controlled. That he has murdered 3 people and will continue killing unless we perform some ancient ritual that may well cost all of our lives. Yes, your Imperial Majesty, Master Liu replied without hesitation. I know how it sounds, but the evidence is overwhelming. Master Liu spread ancient texts across the marble floor, pointing out illustrations that matched the wounds found on the victims. He presented testimonies from servants and guards that painted a picture of supernatural activity. Most damning of all, he showed a timeline that correlated every strange occurrence with the phases of the moon. "And this ritual you propose," the Emperor said when the presentation was complete, "what exactly would it require of me?" "You would need to confront Prince Chen Wei during his moment of greatest hunger, tonight, when the moon is full. The shock of seeing you, of recognizing that he might harm the person he loves most, could break through the curse's hold on his consciousness." Master Liu's voice grew heavy. "But your majesty, you must understand. The creature he has become will not hesitate to attack you. Your life would be in mortal danger. And if the ritual fails, then either the curse will complete its hold on him, making him a monster permanently, or the shock will destroy his mind entirely." The physician met his emperor's eyes directly. "There is also a significant possibility that you will not survive the encounter." The emperor stopped pacing and turned to face the three supplicants. In their faces, he saw the same fear and desperation that had been eating at his own heart for weeks. "Why?" he asked simply. "Why would you risk your lives to help him?" Mei Lin stepped forward, her small frame straightening with dignity. "Because Prince Chen Wei has always treated us with kindness, Your Majesty. Even now, when the monster controls him, some part of him is still fighting to protect others. The night he encountered me in the courtyard, he could have killed me easily. Instead, he warned me to run. And you believe that part of him can be saved?" "I have to believe it, Your Majesty. If we abandon hope for those who are lost, what does that say about our own humanity?" Emperor Kangxi felt something crack inside his chest, the careful wall he had built between his roles as father and ruler. These servants, who owed him nothing beyond basic obedience, were willing to die for his son. "We will attempt the ritual tonight," he decided, "but Elder Huang and Mei Lin will remain in the protected area outside the chambers. If something goes wrong, they are to flee immediately. I will not have their courage rewarded with needless death." The moon hung like a malevolent eye above the forbidden city as Emperor Kangxi made his way through corridors that had never seemed so foreboding. Master Liu walked beside him, carrying implements needed for the ritual. The prince's wing of the palace felt different as they approached, air thicker, charged with otherworldly energy. They paused outside Chen Wei's chambers. From within came sounds Master Liu had heard described, low growling, scraping of claws against stone, and something that might have been sobbing if it had come from human throats. "Remember," the physician whispered, "you must force him to see what he has become. Show him the evidence of his crimes, make him confront the reality of the murders. Only when his human consciousness fully understands the horror can the curse be broken." The emperor drew a deep breath and pushed open the doors. The chamber beyond was a scene from nightmares. Furniture lay overturned and shredded, tapestries hung in ribbons from the walls, and deep claw marks scored the wooden panels. In the center of the destruction, Prince Chen Wei crouched like a wild animal, his court robes torn and stained. But it was his transformation that struck the emperor like a physical blow. Chen Wei's skin had taken on a corpse-like pallor, his fingernails had grown into razor-sharp claws, and his teeth had elongated into fangs that gleamed with unnatural light. Most disturbing were his eyes. They still held traces of the sun, he remembered, but overlaid with predatory hunger that belonged to no human creature. "Chen Wei," the emperor said, his voice carrying all the authority of his position and all the love of a father. "Look at me, my son." The creature slowly raised its head, and for a moment, recognition flickered in those terrible eyes. "Father, you should not be here. It is not safe." "I know what you have become," Emperor Kangxi said, stepping further into the room despite every instinct screaming at him to flee. I know about Minister Li, about Cook Jiang, about the others. I know about the hunger that drives you. Chen Wei's face contorted with anguish. I tried to stop it. I fought it every night, but the hunger is so strong, Father. And when it takes control, I remember nothing. I wake to find blood under my fingernails and the taste of life on my tongue. Master Liu began preparing the ritual circle, spreading herbs and blessed objects while muttering incantations in languages older than the dynasty. The creature that shared Chen Wei's body hissed at the holy symbols, its form becoming more monstrous as sacred energies filled the room. You must see clearly what you have done, the Emperor continued, producing detailed drawings of the murder scenes. These people died by your hand, torn apart by claws and teeth that were once human. Their families mourn them, their children cry for fathers who will never return. As Chen Wei looked at the evidence of his crimes, something broke inside him. The human part of his consciousness, which had been suppressed during the killings, suddenly experienced the full weight of what he had become. He saw Minister Li's terrified face, felt the man's life force flowing into him, remembered the satisfaction the monster had felt as it fed. No, he whispered, then screamed it with a voice that shattered windows throughout the palace. No! The cry of anguish was so profound it seemed to tear reality itself. The creature's form began to writhe and shift, the curse warring with his human will as Master Liu's ritual reached its crescendo. Dark energy poured from Chen Wei's body like smoke, seeking a new vessel to inhabit. "The pendant!" Master Liu shouted. "Now, Your Majesty." Emperor Kangxi held up blessed jade, and the dark energy struck it like lightning seeking a rod. The pendant glowed with malevolent light as it absorbed the curse, growing hot enough to burn the emperor's palm. But he held on, pouring all his love for his son into the act of salvation. Chen Wei collapsed to his knees, his form returning to something recognizably human. But the trauma of seeing his crimes, of understanding what he had done during his blackouts, had shattered something fundamental in his mind. "I killed them," he whispered. "I killed innocent people. I am a monster." "No," the Emperor said, kneeling beside his son and gathering him into his arms, despite the blood and smell of death that clung to him. "You were cursed. You fought it as long as you could, and now it is broken." Master Liu examined Chen Wei's possessions, finding an ornate mirror with silver backing that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. A small jade charm attached to the handle revealed itself to be carved with symbols that predated known Chinese writing systems. This mirror was a gift to the prince 3 months ago, around the time his symptoms first appeared, Master Liu explained. These symbols match those described in the most dangerous texts about curse creation. Someone with extensive knowledge of dark magic created this specifically to corrupt whoever looked into the mirror regularly. Emperor Kangxi felt cold dread settling in his stomach. "You are saying this was a deliberate attack on my son?" "More than that, Your Majesty. This level of magical sophistication suggests someone with access to forbidden knowledge and significant resources. They would have needed detailed information about the prince's habits, his chambers, even his daily routines. Captain Zhao had brought security records showing that no official delegation from the western provinces had visited the palace 3 months ago. The mirror appeared to have materialized without any documented source. Multiple reports of servants finding objects moved in Chen Wei's chambers, strange sounds during the night, and complaints about drafts in rooms that should have been sealed painted a picture of regular infiltration. This was not a random attack or even a foreign plot, Emperor Kangxi concluded. Someone close to the imperial family orchestrated this, someone who understood both the supernatural and political consequences of turning my son into a monster. But before they could proceed further with their investigation, Captain Zhao's body was discovered in the archives where he had been investigating Minister Li's private papers. Unlike the previous victims, Zhao had not been killed by supernatural means. His throat bore the precise cut of a master assassin's blade. Pinned to Captain Zhao's uniform was a message written in the same archaic script found on the cursed mirror. The old dynasty ends with the next full moon. The new order rises from its ashes. Papers clutched in the captain's death grip revealed a story of corruption and betrayal that reached into the highest levels of the imperial government. Zhao had uncovered evidence of massive financial irregularities involving trade agreements with the western provinces, agreements that had never been officially approved, but had generated enormous profits for someone within the palace hierarchy. More damning still were correspondence fragments showing coordination between corrupt officials and practitioners of dark magic. The western provinces, it appeared, harbored more than just political dissidents. They had become a haven for sorcerers who blamed the imperial system for suppressing their ancient practices. But the most shocking discovery was a partially burned letter found among the papers, written in elegant calligraphy that Emperor Kangxi recognized with growing horror. The signature belonged to Prince Chen Yuan, his younger son and Chen Wei's brother. The letter was addressed to someone identified only as the Master of Shadows and spoke of growing impatience with the Crown Prince's resistance to the curse. Yuan had requested more powerful methods to complete the transformation, and the letter mentioned that the curse placed on Chen Wei was only the beginning of a grand ritual that required the life force of an entire imperial bloodline. "He orchestrated everything," the emperor said, his voice hollow with betrayal. "The curse, the murders, even the investigation that led us to discover it. He wanted Chen Wei to complete the transformation, to become a monster that would have to be destroyed, clearing his path to the throne." But Yuan's ambitions went far beyond simple succession. The letter revealed his intention to sacrifice the entire royal family to dark powers, gaining supernatural abilities that would make his rule unquestionable. The western provinces had promised him dominion over more than just China. They spoke of an empire that would span continents, sustained by the regular sacrifice of human life force. "Where is Prince Yuan now?" the emperor demanded. "According to palace records, he returned from the western provinces yesterday evening," Master Liu replied. "He requested permission to visit his brother and offer comfort during his recovery." The implication was clear. Yuan intended to complete his ritual tonight, using Chen Wei's cursed blood as the final component in whatever dark magic he planned to unleash. The Emperor and Master Liu reached Chen Wei's chambers as Yuan completed his ritual preparations. They found Chen Wei bound in a circle drawn with blood, his wrists chained with bonds that glowed with malevolent energy. But it was Yuan who commanded attention. His appearance had been transformed by the dark magic he had embraced. His skin had taken on a corpse-like pallor. His eyes burned with unholy fire, and shadows writhed around him like living things. Symbols had been carved directly into his flesh, wounds that wept constantly, but leaked darkness instead of blood. "Father," Yuan said without turning around, his voice carrying harmonics that hurt to hear. "How good of you to join us. Your presence will make the ritual even more powerful. Release your brother," the emperor commanded, raising his blessed sword. "Whatever power you seek, this path will only lead to damnation." Yuan finally turned, revealing a face marked with supernatural corruption. "Damnation. Father, I have found salvation. The old ways of ruling through fear and tradition are ending. The people will follow strength, and supernatural power provides strength beyond imagination." "You cursed your own brother. You turned him into a monster and made him kill innocent people. I gave him the opportunity to embrace power, but he fought it. His weakness disappointed our allies in the western provinces. Yuan gestured toward Chen Wei, who was struggling against his supernatural bonds. But his blood, tainted with curse energy, will serve our purposes just as well. Master Liu stepped forward, brandishing holy symbols and beginning a counterchant in ancient Sanskrit. But Yuan merely smiled and gestured dismissively. Invisible force struck the old physician, hurling him against the wall with bone-crushing impact. Your little monk magic cannot stand against powers that predate your civilization, Yuan said. The entities I serve ruled this land when your ancestors were still cowering in caves. The ritual circle began to glow brighter, fed by Chen Wei's supernatural blood and Yuan's willing corruption. Outside, storm clouds gathered with unnatural speed, and throughout the palace, servants reported seeing shadows moving independently of any light source. But Chen Wei, despite his bonds, managed to speak with the authority of someone who had faced the monster within himself and survived. Yuan, you think you control these powers, but you are wrong. I have felt their hunger, tasted their influence. They will consume you just as they tried to consume me. I am not weak like you, brother. I embraced the transformation willingly, made myself a vessel for their will. The Emperor realized that direct attack would fail, so he chose a different approach. Yuan, look at what you have become. Look at the monster you are willingly embracing. For a moment, Yuan's chanting faltered. Despite his supernatural transformation, some part of him remained his father's son. I have become powerful, father. More powerful than any emperor in our dynasty's history. You have become a slave, the emperor replied, stepping closer despite the crackling energy. These entities you serve, do you really believe they will allow you to rule? Or will you simply be their puppet, feeding them the life force of our people until nothing remains? Doubt flickered in Yuan's burning eyes, but the dark entities reinforced his ambitions while suppressing his humanity. The old order is ending. I will build something better from its ashes. When Chen Wei managed to raise his head, brother, I have felt their hunger. I know what they truly want. They do not seek to build, only to consume. Once they have drained this empire, they will move on to the next and the next, until nothing living remains. Master Liu, despite his injuries, gasped from where he lay. Prince Yuan, do you know what happened to the last dynasty that made bargains with these entities? Their bones lie beneath the western deserts, and their cities have been consumed by sand. For the first time since his transformation began, Yuan truly looked at what he had become. He saw his father's grief, his brother's anguish, and the corruption that had consumed his own body. The entities whispered seductively in his mind, but their promises now seemed hollow against the reality of what he was witnessing. Yuan began, his voice human for the first time in hours. I wanted to be worthy. I wanted to be strong enough to rule after you were gone. You were always worthy, the Emperor said, stepping into the ritual circle despite the energy that seared his flesh. But worthiness is not about power. It is about the choices we make when everything we love is at stake. The dark entities, sensing their hold weakening, poured more of their influence into Yuan. His form began to shift and writhe as supernatural and human natures warred within him. The ritual circle pulsed with increasing intensity, drawing power from both brothers' cursed blood. But then Chen Wei, drawing on reserves of strength he did not know he possessed, managed to speak the words that would change everything. Brother, I forgive you. The simple statement struck Yuan like a physical blow. After everything he had done, the curse, the murders, the betrayal of family and empire, his brother offered forgiveness rather than condemnation. The unexpected grace shattered something fundamental in Yuan's corrupted consciousness. With a scream that shook the foundations of the palace, Yuan rejected the entities that had claimed him. The backlash of supernatural energy was devastating, but instead of fleeing from it, he embraced the pain as penance for his crimes. The ritual circle exploded in a burst of light that temporarily blinded everyone in the chamber. When their vision cleared, both princes lay motionless on the floor. Chen Wei's bonds had been shattered by the magical feedback, but he was unconscious and barely breathing. Yuan's transformation had been reversed, but the cost of breaking free from the entities had left him changed in ways that would never fully heal. Emperor Kangxi knelt between his sons, gathering them both into his arms, despite the residual magical energy that still crackled through the chamber. Master Liu, his injuries apparently less severe than they had appeared, began examining both princes with shaking hands. "The immediate danger is over," the physician reported. "The entities have been banished, at least for now. But both princes will bear the scars of this night for the rest of their lives." As dawn broke over the Forbidden City, the imperial family began the long process of healing, not just from supernatural curses, but from the deeper wounds of betrayal and corruption. The palace, which had seemed like a prison of shadows and fear, slowly returned to something resembling normalcy, though those who had witnessed the night's events would never again view their world with complete innocence. Chen Wei eventually recovered from his ordeal, but the experience had changed him irrevocably. The memories of what he had done while under the curse's influence, the taste of human life force, the satisfaction the monster had felt in killing, haunted his dreams and waking hours alike. Despite his father's reassurances that he had not been responsible for his actions, Chen Wei could not escape the knowledge that somewhere within him had lurked the capacity for such terrible hunger. After weeks of agonizing deliberation, he made the decision that would define the rest of his life. Standing before his father in the same throne room where the conspiracy had first been revealed, Chen Wei formally renounced his claim to the succession. "I cannot rule an empire when I do not trust myself," he said, his voice steady despite the pain evident in his eyes. "The people deserve a leader who has never tasted human blood, who has never felt the satisfaction of taking a life. I will dedicate my remaining years to studying the supernatural threats that lurk in our world's shadows, ensuring that future generations are better prepared than we were." Yuan's recovery was even more complicated. The rejection of the dark entities had saved his soul, but at tremendous cost. The supernatural energies that had flowed through him left him physically weakened and mentally scarred. More than that, the guilt over the innocent lives lost to his ambition, Minister Li, Cook Jiang, Captain Zhao, and others, drove him to the edge of madness. It was Mei Lin, surprisingly, who helped pull him back from that brink. The young servant, who had every reason to hate the prince who had orchestrated the horrors that nearly consumed them all, instead chose to see in Yuan the same possibility for redemption that she had fought to preserve in Chen Wei. "Your Highness," she said during one of his darkest moments, when he spoke of ending his own life as penance for his crimes, "the dead cannot be brought back, but the living can still be served. If you truly wish to atone, then live a life worthy of the forgiveness your brother offered you." Her words, simple and direct as they were, cut through Yuan's self-pity and forced him to confront a different kind of responsibility. He began working in the palace's lower levels, serving the common people whose lives he had once viewed as expendable. The physical labor and constant reminder of his place in the world helped ground him, while the gratitude of those he helped slowly began to heal the wounds in his spirit. Emperor Kangxi, meanwhile, faced the challenge of maintaining the dynasty's stability while implementing the changes necessary to prevent future supernatural attacks. The official story of foreign poisoning and political intrigue was accepted by the court, but privately, the emperor worked with Master Liu to establish a secret order dedicated to monitoring and responding to supernatural threats. The Order of the Jade Pendant, named after the artifact that had contained Chen Wei's curse, operated in the shadows of the imperial bureaucracy. Its members were recruited from scholars, physicians and guards who had demonstrated both competence and discretion. Their mission was twofold: to research and catalogue supernatural phenomena and to train future generations in the recognition and combat of such threats. Master Liu, despite his advanced age, threw himself into this work with renewed vigor. The forbidden texts that had once been hidden away were carefully studied and copied, their knowledge preserved but also refined through systematic investigation. The old physician established training protocols for identifying supernatural possession, curse symptoms, and the early signs of dark magic influence. The cursed mirror that had started Chen Wei's transformation was destroyed in a ritual that took 3 days and nights to complete. The jade pendant that had absorbed the curse was sealed in a specially prepared vault beneath the Forbidden City, surrounded by protective wards and blessed artifacts. Master Liu insisted that it should never be destroyed completely. The knowledge it contained about the curse's nature might prove valuable in combating future threats. As months passed, life in the palace settled into new patterns. Chen Wei established himself as an unofficial advisor on supernatural matters, his experience with transformation giving him insights that proved invaluable. Yuan's dedication to serving others gradually earned him a measure of peace, though he never fully forgave himself for his role in the tragedy. The emperor ruled for many more years, but the events of those terrible nights had changed his approach to governance fundamentally. He became more suspicious of gifts from foreign delegations, more attentive to the spiritual and supernatural aspects of ruling, and more protective of his family's well-being. The lessons learned from nearly losing his sons to dark magic influenced every major decision of his remaining reign. Mei Lin and Elder Huang were quietly rewarded for their courage, though both women preferred to remain in their positions rather than accept promotions that would have taken them away from the work they loved. Their bravery in the face of supernatural terror became a legend whispered among the palace servants, a reminder that heroism could emerge from the most unexpected quarters. The official histories would record this period as a time of strange illnesses and political intrigue, carefully edited to remove any mention of supernatural forces. But those who knew the truth understood that the empire had faced something far more dangerous than any conventional enemy. They had confronted the eternal human temptation to seek power at any cost, and learned that some prices were too high to pay, even for a throne. In the deepest archives of the Forbidden City, sealed records told the true story of the Emperor's son and his terrible transformation. These documents served as both warning and instruction for future rulers, a reminder that the greatest threats to any dynasty often came not from external enemies, but from the darkness that could take root within the human heart. The curse had been broken, the immediate danger had passed, but the vigilance it necessitated would continue for generations. In the shadows of the Imperial Palace, the Order of the Jade Pendant stood ready to face whatever supernatural threats might emerge, armed with knowledge bought at the cost of innocence and paid for with the tears of a father who had nearly lost everything he held dear. The Forbidden City endured, as it always had, but those who walked its corridors now understood that some secrets were worth keeping, some knowledge was worth preserving, and some prices were worth paying to protect the light from the encroaching darkness. The dynasty had survived its encounter with the supernatural, not through power or cunning, but through the simple human choice to value love and forgiveness over ambition and revenge. In the end, that choice had made all the difference.